This morning on American Story with Bob Dotson, it's a look back at the stories we love. For 40 years, Bob has been bringing us tales of amazing people, really off the beaten path.
And now in his new book called American Story, a lifetime search for ordinary people doing extraordinary things, he reveals the lessons he's learned along the way. Bob, good morning. Nice to see you.
Good morning, folks. You know, I have been so fortunate, as we just mentioned, talking just before the break. You know, I have been able to travel this world on NBC's nickel, doing stories about ordinary, everyday people.
Not every immigrant found success, but the wilderness beyond that torch was part of their geography of hope.
I have wandered this country from red hair to gray. 4 million miles. Listening to your stories.
Did you ever lose hope?
No. If I'd ever left hope, I'd never made it.
Wisdom doesn't always wear a suit.
If there was no town, there'd be no people. So they saved themselves is what they did.
America survives and thrives because of seemingly ordinary people who quietly find solutions to challenges we all face. Names we don't know, but should.
So one of the things I'm sure you get asked a lot is who's the most interesting person you've interviewed. And a lot of time people expect it to be a celebrity, a politician. You epitomize that the most interesting people are the ones who we've never heard of before.
I learned that from my grandfather Bailey, who used to sit there on the front porch and tell me stories. He said, you know, don't just listen to the cliches. Try to get beyond that. Somebody tells you a story, there's probably a story behind the story. And he said, what you have to do is to stop asking questions and let them fill the silence with a better answer than you've asked for. And then you get the whole story about people.
I love that you dedicate this book to your grandson, just 2 years old, Aiden, who, by the way, I think when he was 2, you said, he asked someone who was a woman from Turkey, he said, what is your country like? Is it a lot like chicken? Which I appreciated. But you wanted to be a reporter, and you started here in 1972. What is it about being a reporter that sort of drew you?
Well, you know, I think the most important thing about what I do in my life is that I don't feel like a reporter, I feel like a storyteller. But you know, the shortest distance between two people is a good story. And if you tell it well, I start listening to you. And when I start listening to you, I understand how we're all alike. And then we can all move down the road. And I think that's a very important part of what we do. Because I think one of the most underreported things we do in our business is talk about ordinary people and their lives.
And they're the ones who drive this and who drive this country. Some of the stories that we wanted to highlight this morning, there's one, a doctor from Rushville, Illinois, Dr. Russell, is it Donner or Donor?
Donor.
Dr. Russell Donor really changed the way people deal with a doctor in his community.
55 years, he's never taken a vacation. Last time he left the state was in the World War II Army. And you know what he charges for a doctor's appointment? $5. When he started, it was $2, but he says it's gotten a little bit
bit of inflation?
Yeah. First time I met him, I followed him over 30 years. First time I met him, overnight, he had seen 50 patients, he had set a broken arm, and he delivered 2 children, and it was 10 o'clock in the morning.
How did you find him the first time around?
I just wandered through town. And somebody was talking about him in the coffee shop, and they said, you know, we're really lucky to have a doctor who's here all the time. I said, really? They said, yeah, he grew up on a farm outside of town, graduated with honors from the Northwestern University, wanted to be a cardiologist, but then thought, well, maybe the folks back in Rushville need me more.
If we can't, tell us about a guy named Fred Benson. This guy you write about is from Block Island, Rhode Island. But you and I were speaking ahead of this, and I admit I've been sort of revering your storytelling for years. Your first book, Make It Memorable, is kind of what fired me up about this business. One of the things you teach is that you got to interview every ordinary person like their governor. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, I went to do Fred Benson's story because he was 90 years old and he was a state driver's license examiner. If you're 16 on Block Island, you want a driver's license, you park over there, you know, that kind of thing. And I thought, okay, it'll be just a nice, cute story. We were sitting there waiting for the ferry to come and take us home when all of a sudden he said, you know, I've been the police chief, the fire chief, head of the rescue squad. I was in charge of the Chamber of Commerce 5 times. I didn't say anything. And he said, did I tell you that I won the Rhode Island State Lottery? He says, I threw a big party and all the kids, and I told them they could go to college. Oh, by the way, you know I was an 8-year-old orphan when I was taken here by Gerd Milliken, and he was a farmer, and he used to point down at the table when all of his friends were over, and he says, you keep your eye on Fred Benson. And all of a sudden the foghorn started, and he looked back, and by this time, of course, the camera crew had the cameras back up and were shooting all this, right? And he said, I hope he knows how I turned out. So forth. Started as just a funny ha-ha story about a little old guy, kind of a cliche. Ended up, I mean, this is the reason we have a country that we have, is because of guys like Fred Benson.
It is. And in a very special place, too, on Block Island. You find some pretty interesting people there. One of my favorite places in the country. So nice to have you with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And you can catch more of Bob's stories, in his book called American Story.